A Course in Miracles, Lesson 181. I trust my brothers, who are one with me. Trusting your brothers is essential to establishing and holding up your faith in your ability to transcend doubt and lack of sure conviction in yourself. When you attack a brother, you proclaim that he is limited by what you have perceived in him. You do not look beyond his errors. Rather, they are magnified, becoming blocks to your awareness of the self that lies beyond your own mistakes, and past his seeming sins as well as yours. Perception has a focus. It is this that gives consistency to what you see. Change but this focus, and what you behold will change accordingly. Your vision now will shift to give support to the intent which has replaced the one you held before. Remove your focus on your brother's sins, and you experience the peace that comes from faith in sinlessness. This faith receives its only sure support from what you see in others past their sins. For their mistakes, if focused on, are witnesses to sins in you, and you will not transcend their sight and see the sinlessness that lies beyond. Therefore, in practicing today, we first let all such little focuses give way to our great need to let our sinlessness become apparent. We instruct our minds that it is this we seek, and only this, for just a little while. We do not care about our future goals, and what we saw an instant previous has no concern for us within this interval of time wherein we practice changing our intent. We seek for innocence and nothing else. We seek for it with no concern but now. A major hazard to success has been involvement with your past and future goals. You have been quite preoccupied with how extremely different the goals this course is advocating are from those you held before. And you have also been dismayed by the depressing and restricting thought that, even if you should succeed, you will inevitably lose your way again. How could this matter? For the past is gone, the future but imagined. These concerns are but defenses against present change of focus in perception, nothing more. We lay these pointless limitations by a little while. We do not look to past beliefs, and what we will believe will not intrude upon us now. We enter in the time of practicing with one intent, to look upon the sinlessness within. We recognize that we have lost this goal if anger blocks our way in any form. And if a brother's sins occur to us, our narrowed focus will restrict our sight and turn our eyes upon our own mistakes, which we will magnify and call our sins. So, for a little while, without regard to past or future, should such blocks arise, we will transcend them with instructions to our minds to change their focus, as we say, "It is not this that I would look upon. I trust my brothers who are one with me." And we will also use this thought to keep us safe throughout the day. We do not seek for long-range goals. As each obstruction seems to block the vision of our sinlessness, we seek but for surcease, an instant from the misery the focus upon sin will bring, and uncorrected will remain. Nor do we ask for fantasies, for what we seek to look upon is really there. And as our focus goes beyond mistakes, we will behold a wholly sinless world. When seeing this is all we want to see, when this is all we seek for in the name of true perception, are the eyes of Christ inevitably ours, and the love he feels for us becomes our own as well. This will become the only thing we see reflected in the world and in ourselves. The world, which once proclaimed our sins, becomes the proof that we are sinless, and our love for everyone we look upon attests to our remembrance of the holy self which knows no sin and never could conceive of anything without its sinlessness. We seek for this remembrance as we turn our minds to practicing today. We look neither ahead nor backwards. We look straight into the present.
and we give our trust to the experience we ask for now. Our sinlessness is but the will of God. This instant is our willing one with His. Lesson 181. I trust my brothers who are one with me. You made the mistake, the ending. But what if seeing doesn't stop there? A detective knows something a rookie doesn't. The first thing you see is almost never the whole story. The rookie walks onto the scene, sees one clue, builds a conclusion, closes the case, and goes home. The detective says, start from the beginning. Keep looking. Don't stop there.
Now think about a sniper. People think the sniper sees more than everyone else. He doesn't. He actually sees less. He narrows his focus until one thing fills the scope. The trees are still there. The wind is still there. The birds are still there. The sky is still there. His partner is still standing beside him. Nothing disappeared. His attention simply stopped somewhere. Now ask yourself a question. What has your attention stopped on? Because perception has a focus. It always has. You can't help but look. The question has never been whether you're looking. The question is, what are you looking at? And even deeper than that, where does your seeing stop? Have you noticed that whatever you consistently focus on begins to feel like the whole world? If you focus on betrayal, betrayal starts showing up everywhere. If you focus on lack, lack seems to be around every corner. If you focus on guilt, guilt begins to explain everything. Not because reality changed, but because your focus became consistent. The world starts reflecting the purpose for which you're looking. Stand in front of a mirror. You already know what you're expecting to see. You never walk up to a mirror wondering if your reflection will show up today. So why are we surprised when the mind reflects what it has been consistently looking for? The mirror isn't creating your reflection. It is revealing where you're standing. The world isn't telling you what to see. It is reflecting the purpose you brought to seeing. That's why today's lesson begins with one of the most radical statements in A Course in Miracles. I trust my brothers who are one with me. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say your brother has to earn your trust. It doesn't say trust him after he apologizes. It doesn't say trust him once he changes. It simply says, I trust my brothers who are one with me. If your brother is one with you, then trusting your brother and trusting yourself cannot be two different things. If you refuse to trust your brother, what have you quietly declared about yourself? Ideas do not leave their source. Every judgment has one birthplace. Every proclamation begins in the mind but proclaims it. You first. Before trust reaches your brother, you experience trust. Before judgment reaches your brother, you experience judgment. That's why this lesson isn't really investigating your brother. It's investigating the one who is looking. And before we go any further, we have to understand exactly how perception works. And that's where Jesus makes one of the simplest statements in the entire lesson. Perception has a focus. That may be one of the most overlooked sentences in A Course in Miracles. Perception has a focus. It doesn't say perception has truth. It doesn't say perception has facts. It doesn't say perception has certainty. It has a focus. Now go back to the sniper. The sniper didn't make the landscape disappear. The landscape never left. He simply narrowed his attention until one thing became his entire world. The rocks are still there. The clouds are still there. The birds are still there. His partner is still there. Nothing changed except the focus. And because the focus changed, his experience changed. Now think about your own life. How many things could you focus on right now? An infinite number.
You could focus on everything that went wrong yesterday. You could focus on everything you're afraid might happen tomorrow. You could focus on what somebody said about you. You could focus on what somebody failed to say about you. You could focus on your bank account, your reputation, your body, your past, your future. Or you could remember, I must still be as God created me. Every one of those is available to you. So the question isn't whether you can focus. The question is, what are you using your focus for? Because whatever you consistently focus on eventually begins to feel obvious. Not because it became true, because it became familiar. That's why people can spend years saying the world is dangerous, years saying people can't be trusted, years saying love never lasts, years saying they're broken. Then one day, they point to their experience and say, "See, I told you so." But what they're really seeing is the consistency of their own focus. Then Jesus says something extraordinary. Change but this focus, and what you behold will change accordingly. Notice what didn't have to change: the world, your brother, the past. Only the focus.
That's why he says your vision will shift to support the intent which has replaced the one you held before. Ah, there it is. Intent. The question isn't simply, what are you looking at? The deeper question is, why are you looking? What is your seeing trying to prove? If your intent is to find guilt, you'll find it. If your intent is to find mistakes, you'll find them. If your intent is to justify fear, you'll gather evidence all day long. But if your intent changes, your seeing follows it. Vision serves purpose. Perception follows intent. That's why the course never begins by changing your brother. It changes the purpose for which you're looking at your brother. And the moment that purpose changes, an entirely different world begins to come into view. Now think about every murder investigation you've ever watched. Once they figure out who did it, what does everybody want to know? Why? Why did he do it? Why her? Why that day? Why those children? Why? Everybody wants the why. But have you noticed something? Even after they tell you why, people still aren't satisfied. He wanted the insurance money. He was jealous. He wanted revenge. He didn't want to pay child support. He wanted control. And people still say, I just don't understand. Why? Because the explanation never removes the pain. The motive explains the behavior. It doesn't restore peace. That's because people aren't really looking for information. They're looking for relief. They're trying to make sense out of what feels unbearable. They're hoping that if they can finally understand why, somehow the world will make sense again. But the grievance survives the explanation. The facts change. The hurt doesn't. Now listen to today's lesson. A major hazard to success has been involvement with your past and future goals. Not the past, not the future. Your involvement. That's a fascinating word. Detectives use it all the time. Was he involved? What was her involvement? How did they become involved? The course quietly asks the same question. How did your mind become involved? Because involvement is participation. It's investment. It's where attention becomes emotionally committed to something. Now ask yourself something. If the past is gone, what are you involved with? If the future is imagined, what are you involved with? If the past represents nothing, then becoming involved with it means becoming involved with nothing. That's cold. The world spends its life arguing over what is already gone and worrying about what has not yet arrived. Then Jesus asks one of the greatest questions in the entire lesson. How could this matter? Not, why does this hurt? Not, why did this happen? How could this matter? Matter means to make a difference, to have significance, to change something. So the real question becomes, how could what is already gone make any difference to what God created? How could what has not yet happened change what God created? How could nothing alter reality? That's not a statement. It's an investigation. And Detective Boy smiles, because that's the right question. The moment you ask it, the whole case begins to turn. And that's why Jesus doesn't ask us to solve our whole life. He asks for something much smaller, much gentler, much more immediate. He says we do not seek for long-range goals. Think about that. The world is obsessed with long-range goals. 5-year plans, 10-year plans, finding your purpose, becoming your highest self, finally getting there. Jesus says, not now. Not because goals are the problem, but because the mind has become involved with a future that isn't here and a past that is already gone. This moment asks for something entirely different. As each obstruction seems to block the vision of our sinlessness, we seek but for surcease an instant. Just an instant. Not forever. Not for the rest of your life. Just an instant. Surcease means to stop, to pause, to bring something burdensome to an end. Notice what Jesus is asking. He isn't asking you to become enlightened before dinner. He isn't asking you to solve every grievance you've ever held. He isn't asking you to explain your childhood. He isn't asking you to quote more scripture, or memorize more theology, or build a better philosophy. He says, just let it stop. For one instant. Because the grievance has momentum. One judgment leads to another. One memory calls another memory. One complaint gathers another witness. Before long, you've built an entire courtroom in your mind. Then comes the correction. It is not this that I would look upon. I trust my brothers who are one with me. Notice what changed. Not your brother. Not the world. Not the past. The focus. That's the miracle. Then Jesus says something so simple you can almost miss it. If a brother's sins occur to us, occurred. Not if your brother sins. Not if your brother attacks you. If your brother's sins occur to you. In other words, if the thought arises in your mind, the battlefield has been in thought the whole time. And if the thought can occur, it can also pass. If the will to see sin is not corrected, the misery remains. Not because sin is powerful, because the focus never changed. The misery doesn't continue because your brother keeps doing something. The misery continues because the mind keeps returning to the same place. That's why Jesus doesn't ask for a lifetime. He asks for one instant, one tiny willingness, one clean interruption in the habit of seeing guilt. Because if you can experience even one instant without the grievance, you discover something extraordinary. The grievance wasn't holding you. You were holding the grievance. And in that instant, seeing doesn't stop where it used to. And now the lesson reaches its great reversal. Nor do we seek for fantasies. Think about that. The world immediately says, oh, you're just pretending. You're ignoring reality. You're acting like nothing happened. Jesus answers that objection before it is even spoken. Nor do we seek for fantasies. For what we seek to look upon is really there. Really there. Those two words carry the whole lesson. Notice something about the course. Everything truth talks about is already there. It's already given. It's already present. It's already established. It's already true. It isn't coming around the corner. It isn't waiting for you in the future. It isn't hiding until you've practiced enough. It's already there. That's why Jesus never says, become innocent. He says, look upon what is really there. He never says, earn your sinlessness. He says, let your sinlessness become apparent. Apparent.
That's a beautiful word. Something becomes apparent because it was there before you noticed it. The clouds move, and the mountain becomes apparent. The mountain wasn't created, it was revealed. That's this lesson. For years we've focused on guilt, we've focused on mistakes, we've focused on appearances, we've focused on what seemed obvious. So Jesus gently reminds us, innocence is really there. Love is really there. Your brother is really there. The Holy Self is really there. Then comes one of the greatest reversals in the entire course. Sin seems obvious, but it is only seeming. Sinlessness seems hidden, but it is what becomes apparent. That's Detective Boy. The rookie stops at the appearance. The detective keeps investigating until what only seemed true collapses, and what was always true stands there in plain sight. That's why Jesus says our focus goes beyond mistakes. He doesn't say the mistakes disappear first. He says the focus moves first. Most people think looking beyond means ignoring. It doesn't. How can you ignore something you believe is real? The very act of trying to ignore it gives it reality in your mind. Looking beyond is something entirely different. Imagine standing with your nose pressed against a chain-link fence. All you can describe is metal. Move your attention beyond the fence, and suddenly there's an entire landscape. The fence may still be there. It simply stopped being the ending of your vision. That's what Jesus means by beyond. The mistake isn't denied. It simply stops being the place where seeing ends. And the moment seeing doesn't stop there, the eyes of Christ become inevitable. The eyes of Christ inevitably become ours. I love that word. Inevitably. Not possibly. Not hopefully. Not if you practice long enough. Inevitably. Because once the purpose of seeing changes, the result follows naturally. Then the lesson says something astonishing. The world which once proclaimed our sins becomes the proof that we are sinless. Notice that word again. Proclaimed. Not proved, not established, not demonstrated. Proclaimed. A proclamation is an announcement. It isn't truth.
Courts proclaim. Governments proclaim. The news proclaims. People proclaim. But a proclamation doesn't create reality. It only reveals what the one proclaiming believes. The world once proclaimed guilt. Now the very same world proclaims innocence. Did the world change? Or did the purpose for which you looked change? That's the miracle. Then Jesus says our love for everyone we look upon attests to our remembrance of the Holy Self. Attests. Another courtroom word. A witness attests. Evidence attests. Your love becomes the witness. Not a witness that your brother finally became lovable. A witness that you remembered what both of you are. Love is no longer something you manufacture. It becomes evidence that remembrance has occurred. That's why trusting your brother was never really about your brother. It was always about what you remember. Because if your brother is one with you, then every judgment has only one birthplace. You first. Before trust reaches your brother, you experience trust. Before judgment reaches your brother, you experience judgment. Ideas do not leave their source. Every thought returns to the mind that thought it. Every witness you call against your brother quietly takes the stand against you. Every witness you call for innocence quietly testifies for you. Now the whole lesson starts making sense. Jesus never asked you to change your brother. He never asked you to manage your brother. He never asked you to fix your brother. He kept bringing your attention back to one place. Your mind, your focus, your intent, your seeing. Because that's where all the agency has been the entire time. That's where every proclamation begins. That's where every judgment is born. And that's where every miracle quietly begins as well. And that's why the lesson keeps bringing us back to the same place. Now. Not the already gone. Not the not yet. Now. We look neither ahead nor backwards. We look straight into the present. Look it dead in the eyes. Because where else could you ever meet truth? Where else could you ever experience God? Not yesterday. Yesterday is gone. Not tomorrow. Tomorrow is imagined. Only now. That's why Jesus asks one of the most penetrating questions in the lesson. How could this matter? Matter means to make a difference, to have significance, to change something. So the question isn't whether something seems to have happened. The question is, how could it make any difference to what God created? How could what is already gone change the eternal? How could what has not yet happened alter what has always been? That's not a conclusion. That's an investigation. Then Jesus tells us exactly what to do. We instruct our minds. Think about that. We instruct our minds. That means there must be a decision-making mind. The mind can choose again. It isn't trapped. It isn't stuck. It can receive a new instruction. And the instruction is beautifully simple. It is not this that I would look upon. I trust my brothers, who are one with me. Notice, the instruction isn't given to your brother. It isn't given to the world. It isn't given to the past. It's given to your mind. Because that's where the focus changes. That's where intent changes. That's where perception changes. And that's where experience changes. Jesus isn't asking you to fix your whole life today. He isn't asking you to solve every problem you've ever had. He isn't asking you to figure out your purpose. How can you have a purpose other than the one God gave you? He's asking for something infinitely simpler. One instant. One instant of willingness. One instant of laying the grievance down. One instant of no longer making the mistake the ending. One instant where seeing doesn't stop at guilt. One instant where innocence becomes apparent. One instant where love is allowed to be what was really there all along. And if you can give that one instant, you've already stepped outside the dream of time. Here's the concluding section, bringing the entire lesson to its natural ending. Everything we've talked about in this lesson comes down to one question. Where does your seeing stop? Does it stop at the mistake? Does it stop at the grievance? Does it stop at the past? Does it stop at what your brother did or said? Or does it go beyond? That's been the invitation from the very beginning. Not to become something new, but to stop ending your vision where you've always ended it before. The rookie closes the case too early. Detective Boy keeps looking. The sniper reminds us that focus determines experience. The mirror reminds us that the world reflects the purpose for which we are looking. The courtroom reminds us that every proclamation begins in the mind that proclaims it. The homicide investigation reminds us that even after the world answers why, peace still isn't found there. And Jesus quietly asks a different question. How could this matter? How could what is already gone make any difference to what God created? How could what has not yet happened alter the eternal? It can't. That's why the lesson never asks us to change our brother. It asks us to change our focus. It never asks us to earn innocence. It asks us to recognize what is really there. It never asks us to manufacture love. It reminds us, but love was never absent. It never asks us to create truth. It reminds us that truth has been waiting patiently behind every mistake we made the ending.
Now the cloud makes perfect sense. Look. Focus. Seek. See. Your life has always reflected what you've been seeking. If you seek guilt, guilt becomes your evidence. If you seek separation, separation becomes your experience. If you seek innocence, innocence begins to become apparent. Not because you created it, because it was really there. Already there. Always there. Never not there. The mistake was never the ending. It was only the place where you stopped looking. Today, Jesus invites us to take one more step. To look just beyond the mistake. Just beyond the grievance. Just beyond the appearance. And there, waiting exactly where it has always been, we remember the truth. I trust my brothers, who are one with me, because I must still be as God created me.